Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time it is, wherever you are in our amazing planet Earth. I am thrilled to be joined today by Ole Olsen Bagno. Ole's a friend of mine. We met a few years ago in person in Austin. Ole is an expert on all things metadata and data catalogs. And we're going to go deep on data catalogs, metadata. We're going to talk a lot about context, which seems to be the thing that everybody is talking about. Before we do any of that, let me remind our listeners, if you get an opportunity to go to a conference that Ole is speaking at, interact with him and somehow, some way, I would absolutely recommend that because he's one of the smartest people I've ever known or spoken to in the world of data. So you will be enriched through a conversation with him. But I would invite you to get his name correct. It bugs me, my friend, that that it almost bugs me that it doesn't bug you that people mispronounce your first name like constantly. And if people were mispronouncing my first name constantly, I don't know, it would drive me bonkers. People misspell my name all the time. It drives me bonkers. So, Ole, with that, welcome to the CDO Matters podcast.
Thank you, Malcolm. It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. And I just knowing you, you're probably not going to even talk about the issue about your first name, but I would invite everybody to say it correctly.
I just for me, it's just not. I've been used to it all my life, so it's not. It's as if, like, if you have, I don't really know what to compare it with, but if you had I don't know, if you had a weird car, for example, and everyone you met say, "Oh, that's a weird car," and yeah, but I've got it for like 42 years, so it's just my car. That's just how I feel about my name. Obviously, it's difficult to pronounce, and everyone feels a little ashamed. But there are bigger problems in the world.
Okay. We'll let it go, but I'm not letting it go. I'm evangelizing. This is what we do. Ole and I have are interesting and kindred spirits because we actually have the same job, and it's not a very, very common job. There's not many of us in our world that have this job. But Ole and I are both, in essence, evangelists for our companies. Ole works for a software company, Actian. Of course, I work for Profisee. And we get these amazing jobs of going to speak at conferences. Our companies let us write books. We're going to talk about your books in a second here. They let us go and interact with the data community writ large. So I don't know. I think I've got the best job in the world. What do you think about your job?
I have to agree. I think it is a pretty fantastic job. So it's a privilege and an honor for me to represent a company. Basically, I don't think I could do it if I didn't believe very strongly in the technology and the vision, the roadmap we have for our technology. I think that is a absolute key element in such a job, right? If you were to evangelize something that you didn't believe in, then I think it would show very easily, and it would, like, at least for me, and then I just wouldn't be very good at it. So for me, that is very, very closely connected to what I do in this particular job, because prior to this job, I've been an architect and the director for data management and information management departments. So it's really not, so for me, this job is not I guess for you it's the same, right? No one really graduates with the intention of getting this kind of job. It's really rare, right?
Yeah, it's extremely rare. And I appreciate what you just said about, a belief in the company and a belief in what we're doing. And I have the same thing. I believe in my industry, MDM. I believe in it, always have, will continue to. But I think the thing that one of the things that draws me to your insights and draws me to your content and to your books is the fact that you are an expert, right? You're not an influencer. I kind of bristle a little bit when people say, "Oh, well, there's Malcolm with 20-something followers on 20,000 followers on LinkedIn or whatever it is, and you're an influencer." And I'm like, that makes me like, no, I'm not an influencer. data person, born and raised in this world and have done the job and just here to share what I know. And I know you're in the same position. You wouldn't consider yourself like any form of influencer, would you?
No, there are people that have encouraged me to embrace that term or that title, but I really can't. I mean, I think the argument would be, or the best argument would be that you have influence and therefore you are an influencer, whether you not like it or not. The way I see it is true influencers, as you see them on social media in general and not on serious social media like LinkedIn, is someone that's willing to do whatever for reach, for visibility, and obviously for money. And so politicians have a lot of followers also. Professors have a lot of followers. Authors, fiction authors, you get many professions that have a lot of followers, and so I don't see a lot of followers as something that equals you being an influencer. I see the dynamic quite differently. But on the other side, I also feel that you just have to kind of embrace that you live in a world where you can communicate on social media, and you have to do that. And if you don't like it, then you will face difficulties in disseminating your ideas. And so I have a set of principles that guides me on my behavior on social media. I don't know if you want to dig into that or
Yeah. Well, and the reason why is because if you're maybe a little younger, maybe you're in your 30s or maybe even in your 40s, and you're worried about AI, and you're worried about AI taking your job, then my recommendation, at the risk of sounding a little egocentric, is to become like me or become like Olaf. Become an expert. Find a way to have influence in your industry, because if you can do that, AI won't take it. AI won't take that job. It's not going to take my job. It's not going to take Olaf's job, right? Because we're real humans with real ideas and some degree of influence. So yeah, I'd love to hear your criticism.
Yeah, I agree in that. I think domain expertise is something that will never go away, and I definitely encourage everyone to study as hard as they possibly can. I think, look, so for my behavior on social media, I follow a set of rules that are both aligned with the metrics of algorithms and my personal ethics. And so I certainly don't want to preach my personal ethics, but it's just what gives me peace and what makes me sleep at night. Because I wouldn't be a person that would interact aggressively or even passively aggressively with my followers, readers, and friends on social media. I very strongly believe in not doing that. I believe in only learning, expressing curiosity, and also expressing what you don't know. Asking very open questions, not dumb questions, obviously, but open questions that also exposes a lack of knowledge of something. And really use the social media that I am on. It's primarily LinkedIn and to an increasing degree also Substack. Just use it to explore people, ideas, learn, exchange views. But I have a principle that is, and I've written it down because people ask me, and it's no secret. I certainly don't want to keep it for myself, so I can certainly share it. So it's a long, long list, but it really boils down to the fact that I behave very politely. I only send out positive energy. I step away from discussions that go in directions that are condescending, aggressive, any kind of negativity. I just step away from it. I don't want to win those discussions. I let other people have the last word. I salute them. I give them a compliment if that is what they want, and I just step away from it. And that has made me very, very peaceful on social media for a period of time that I think is about 10 years now. So I always sleep at night. I'm never kept up by these like if you get into like really toxic trolling, all of that, I'm just not in it. I'm just not in it, and I'm not for it. And I don't think it helps anyone with anything. So
well, it doesn't. It doesn't help anybody with anything. Something that I want to just follow up on and reiterate and stress. You can be extremely knowledgeable, right? You can be an expert. You can know everything you think there is to know. But if you lack curiosity, and if you lack the growth mindset, if you lack what Ole just described as a desire to learn, then you come across as a know-it-all, and you're not open to any new ideas. And spoiler alert, you don't know it all. There's no way anybody can know it all in this world. So I can be pretty opinionated. I know I can, and I can be pretty forceful. But at the same time, I'm here to learn. And if you follow that just let's go learn. And there are people that you can learn from. I learn from Ole. I hope he learns from me. I learn from many people online. And you know what? It's free. So that's pretty cool. So let's transition into this world of context. I was at the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in Orlando, and it was a pretty hard shift, I know, talking about principles and ethics on social media and going into context. Maybe I should have had more context in my query about context, but I was at the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in Orlando, and the word context was everywhere. It was everywhere. It was in every print overnight. It seems like, and I know it's not overnight. It felt that way because it was so broad. How would you describe this phenomenon? If I'm a CDO and I've been doing data management and I've been supporting my organization, doing the dashboard, doing the BI, doing all the pipelines, managing pipelines, doing data quality, data management, integration, all those things, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about context. How would you explain that to that CDO?
Yeah, so the reason why this change of topic made me laugh a little bit is because I guess this would be one of the topics where I would have difficulties in like staying calm, right? So
always calm.
Because it's like this word is as you're saying, it's everywhere, and I think if I was to, so my view on that is quite simply that I see there are two readings of this word in this time in the data and AI community. If we pitch context as something that is new, that is like a secret sauce to make AI work, then I think we are wrong. I think context is a very old word, and there is nothing wrong with the word context in itself. And I also embrace that we focus more on context these years. What I wouldn't encourage is that people think of context as a new discipline, a new concept, a new way of working. The semantics that fuel what we call context these years has been a struggle for companies for all of our lifetime, and I think also for people that are older. Sorry. So I think the right way to approach a word like context would be to say very pragmatically, okay, so what is it we have that we can surface in our technology stack, in our methodologies, in our ways of working in general, in our educational background that can fuel a context for AI? I think that is a fair way of discussing it. But under the hood, context in itself is a very old term, right? And it comes with nothing new in terms of what that term means.
Well, yeah, this is something that I kind of struggle with a little bit. You know, we've always had context. right? Whether it was a join between tables or whether it was just attributes slash metadata, right? The metadata has always allowed you to infer a reasonable, I would say, a reasonable amount of context. So then my mind goes to, okay, so if it's something more than that, and I think it slightly is more than that. I think it is. It's not the inference of context, but it is the declaration of context that exists potentially in things like knowledge graphs and other technologies like that. Do you see what I'm inferring? I mean, context has always kind of been there. You're an expert in metadata. How would you answer to somebody who said, okay, well, that's not enough. I need more. If that's true, what would you need and why?
Well, I think actually that would be a very fair response if they need more. Because context basically is also expressing a situational setting, right? You walk into a room, you say something, and it can be out of context. It can be out of context because you're unaware of the people in the room that just had a debate about something. You walk in, you state something, and it's very positively received because it's out of context. So everything, so the tacit knowledge that an organization has, it's context. And so I think just expressing context as something that resides between the data and the metadata layer, that's a very data-centric way of approaching context as I see it. And I don't think that is context only, but there is certainly context in there also. But a context discussion should focus on many of the elements that we find in organizations at large, right? And that is also, if you're looking into what an agent in these days. So an agent after the generative AI boom, new agentic architectures emerge and has obviously an understanding and a need for context. And that context obviously is extremely important to capture and to expose in agentic architectures so that they can behave better, understand the context. And so I think that obviously that opens basically the need for viewing the totality of data as something that is more than just the basic structured data of a database. I actually think it's a little harsh, but that may be the least important data in your company now.
Maybe. I would, maybe not, because I would describe these in two different ways. I've got a presentation I've been giving this year and how I describe things related to context, knowledge graphs, ontologies, as things that describe the world of meaning, right? Mm-hmm. That provide meaning. And the stuff in the databases provides measurement. Like we need measurement. We always are going to need measurement, and I think they're co-partners in all of this, meaning and measurement. Forever and ever, all we focused on was measurement because that's what we had to do. We built dashboards, but now we're being asked to provide meaning. What does this actually mean? What does this data mean in context? You had talked about surfacing context in agentic workflows. How are you seeing people actually do that? Is it in knowledge graphs? Is it in ontologies? Is it in how exactly are agents consuming this context?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of architectures that cater for that, and the technical evolution suggests that some of them will not live as long as we might have anticipated 1-2 years ago, right? But basically, I think so that's a broad question, but I can say that it's not that I can't answer it. It's just that there are many answers to it, right? I would say that any kind of metadata structure holds value in this situation. So obviously, I would highly recommend discovering if your organization has some kind of ontology or knowledge graph, or most likely multiple knowledge graphs, ontologies floating around in various departments. If some of those exist, they are highly usable. You can also, just a sec here, I just need to charge my laptop. But
can't have your laptop.
This is easy. That's it. So basically, every kind of metadata structure that your company holds would be of value. The data sources themselves are also of great value, and where we in a very recent past focused only on structured data, tabular data, we now have a very big potential in what I guess the data community, a data AI community, calls unstructured data. So pictures, text, sound, all of that now holds tremendous value to train or set context for agentic architectures.
So there's no one answer, I think is what you're trying to suggest. And the reason why I ask is because when I was at Gartner, I enjoy sitting in the large lunch and breakfast areas and just asking people a lot of questions. And I did that over 3 days. I always do. And I would ask questions like, okay, what's your key takeaway? And across the board, the number one takeaway was, I guess I need to go do context. I'm not sure what that means. That's what I heard over and over again. Like, what does that actually even mean? I guess I have to go figure that out and do that, but I don't even know how to like, where do I start digging? Right? Like, what do I start doing?
Well, so I think we'll both be, maybe this will air after, but I think we will meet in Gartner, London.
We will. This may actually come out after, so there's a bit of time traveling going on. We will have already been there, but yeah, I will see you at Gartner London in about a month.
I look forward to it, and I think increasingly the last couple of years, Gartner has been more and more precise in its. In previous years, I've always been like, when I've looked at Gartner's predictions and like the way they describe things, the technical evolution. But even though it may be difficult for the attendees, Gartner to truly get what context is about, and I completely understand that, I think it's correct that we need to focus on this. And I'm very thrilled, actually, that we are focusing on it. That's not to say it's easy, or like, obviously, every single word you use and put a focus on has the risk of becoming a buzzword. I guess context has already become a buzzword.
Too late. Yep.
And maybe it will also fade fast. I mean, that has a tendency to happen with the words we focus on in tech, right? But it's only in our little bubble it'll fade, because in general, context is a word that is like hundreds of years old, and it'll be used by everyone that like has studied language or history or sociology in 10, 20 years from now, or 100 years from now. So it's only right now that you'll see a peak and then perhaps decrease of it. But I embrace the focus on context, on semantics. I just don't think that we should have the illusion that there is a silver bullet to this problem. I don't think there is one and one only technology to solve this problem, or one methodology to achieve the ultimate context. Those kind of approaches strike me as a little naive, and also as a typical way of expressing your views on language if you are an engineer, if I may be as direct.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously, I think many engineers, many data engineers, many like people in tech, they come from an engineering background, a computer science background, and they have not been trained in thinking about language as something with multiple meanings and the real challenge of syntax and semantics, which is when you go out of the realm of programming languages and turn to real human languages, something way more complicated, way more complicated. And that is where the context is. That's why we're seeing this clash and also the need to focus on it.
It's interesting you should say that, because I've been trying to do some research in this space, right? In the world of broadly known as knowledge management, right? And had the opportunity to give a keynote, the Knowledge Management World Summit in DC at the Taxonomy Boot Camp last year, getting increasingly exposed to that world. And one of the ironies is that we have completely different lexicon. Right, the world of knowledge management, they use words to describe things. You're talking about semantics, you're talking about kind of languages and intent. That world is describing the exact same thing that data people are describing, and we use different words to describe the same thing across these two worlds. It just blows my mind. Like an attribute versus a facet, right? Or a controlled vocabulary versus a glossary. And we can have interesting academic arguments about, are they really the same, but they're slightly different? But there's something there that has been really, really reiterated by me using this thing called OpenClaw and getting familiar with like the use of markdown files to control the behavior of my agents.
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to, and that whole world, like, and creating in essence a file structure and creating in essence an ontology for my OpenClaw bot has been very different in my brain than it was like to model data and to build some schemas, right? And to join some tables, like two very different ways of structuring data and thinking about data that you just touched on. And I think that having more people in our space with library science backgrounds, with knowledge management backgrounds, is going to be an important thing over the next few years. Do you agree? Do you see that as well?
Yes, I mean, I do, and I think some disciplines need to merge somehow. I think we've also been discussing that on LinkedIn and obviously also in real life. Right? These disciplines need to somehow merge. How that will happen and who will come out as like, reluctant to say the winners, but
Yeah.
I think like what I mean with this is that up until generative AI, basically OpenAI, ChatGPT 3.5, data community received an enormous amount of funding from VCs to whatever little component you would have in a modern data stack, right? We're not talking more than 2, 3, 4 years ago. So whatever, like however small that small capability would be, you could like separate it out from a bigger platform and claim a technology category in yourself and say this is an element of data engineering and we need funding and this is what it'll do, and it'll like increase your capability to be data driven as a company. And then it would receive VC funding and it would receive a lot of attention. Books would be written about these things. And then OpenAI happened, like ChatGPT 3.5 happened. And all of that ecosystem combined with a lot of geopolitical things and financial prioritizations across the planet, all of that kind of just imploded. There was nothing left of that. And what we're seeing now is that all of that VC funding combined with COVID, wars, geopolitical change overall is just like derailing all of the strategic funding towards other categories in technology. And that makes me think that I'm not sure what used to be the data community and now the data and AI community will come out on top of all this. I'm not sure about that. Because
I can't resist. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Because
I think that the authority that this community used to have is not as authoritative anymore. And so when you're seeing knowledge management and data management and information management getting closer together because they have realized that they need to work together, apologies, to deliver that infamous context for AI, then I'm not sure whose methodologies and whose technologies will actually dominate that conversation.
Oh, okay, I can't resist. I was going to go deeper on the how do I build context, but what you just said, I can't resist, because what you're talking about is something I think a little more fundamental. And to me, what you just said is the, for lack of a better word, evaporation. Oh, maybe a bad word. I can't find the right word. Speaking of semantics, but is the lessening of the divide between the world of data and the world of business application. Right? Forever and ever, data was this modeled interpretation of business processes that were captured in systems of record, like CRM systems, ERP systems, or even transactional systems like an e-commerce platform. Like we in the data world tried to model those worlds as best we could, but we had a very specific outcome in mind. That outcome was measuring things correctly. Right? It was never necessarily about process optimization per se. It was never explicitly, I'm modeling this data specifically to optimize this process. It was, I'm modeling this data so I can measure it consistently over time. Right? What you just suggested to me in my brain is that as we move more towards the world of using our insights, like the data and knowledge people, using those insights, as we move more and more toward process optimization, we will inevitably that we will inevitably give up ground or give up authority to the worlds that are closer to process management and not data management. Am I paraphrasing you correctly? Do you see this? And am I making any sense here? Maybe?
Sure. I think to the extent that process management is also containing unstructured data, I think I can find common ground on that. I mean, what I'm seeing is, and Bill Inman said it himself, right? 90% of all data in a company is unstructured. Like companies run on documents.
Yeah.
They run on files. They don't run on data. Right. I know they don't run on structured data per se. That's what I'm saying. They run on data. Obviously, they run on data. But they run on unstructured data. And many of the people working in these disciplines wouldn't call it data. They would call it text. They would call it images. If you work in a lab, for example, and you take pictures, they would call it something else than data. But it is, like, technically speaking, of course, it's data. But what I'm saying is that the disciplines around all those systems and all those processes may just have the upper hand here.
There's a thought exercise that I've been thinking about for years now. And we may have talked about this when we were having coffee in Copenhagen. And if I'm repeating myself, that's because I'm getting old. There's this thought exercise that I'm attracted to, which is, could we capture all business interactions, all business transactions as stories instead of data? Just imagine that my interaction going to a website and buying something was captured as a narrative. right? Malcolm landed on Amazon.com, and it was this long story instead of this highly atomized, modeled reality that loses all context, that loses all intent. The BI dashboards don't know how happy I was or how fast it took me to type a search term or not type a search term. It doesn't know any of those things. It doesn't know a lot of things about my interaction that you could capture in a story, right? And if we could capture those stories, this is a thought exercise. I'm not suggesting we do it. Would that change the nature of our businesses? Would that change how I treated you as a customer? And I think maybe the answer is yes. And if we did that, would we even need a lot of these systems of record like CRM systems and ERP systems? This starts to get way academic, and I know that is well beyond the scope of anybody listening to this. Is like, what is that guy talking about? But I do see a fundamental shift where integrating the unstructured data that you're talking about, right? All the things that Inman is talking about. Gartner says the same thing. Right? 80 to 90% all unstructured data, right? Are in our companies are literally running on it. If we start focusing more on that, would it change the nature of how we manage a data function? I think the answer is necessarily that it would. It would need to. That's certainly something to consider.
Sure. I mean, I think you could boil it down to companies becoming unstructured data driven, and instead of data driven, right? And basically, we could. I'm not saying it would happen, but we could imagine a company being running on unstructured data and not structured data. And I think that none of the transactions that you have mentioned so far are impossible to produce in text today. You just need the right input. Yeah. And you don't write that text yourself. That will be generated for you. So yes, I think that is certainly possible. This may be a little academic, but if we're to boil it down to reduce it to some of the things that you said before, is the data community that will win the discussion in terms of what we call things. Will it be called an attribute or a facet? I'm not sure that what was the data community, now the data and AI community, will necessarily win all these discussions. It's not that I don't know. Nobody knows at this point, but there is a possibility that it's not the data community.
I agree. If I go back to my point about the importance of measurement, and I don't think that that's ever going away. We will need to continue to measure, and we will have auditors, and we will have Wall Street, and we will have generally accepted accounting principles, and all the things that require precision. Because everything that we've been talking about around unstructured data, I'm seeing this interesting trade-off. It's always been there, but I'm seeing this interesting trade-off evolve between, if you're using an LLM for insight to make a decision, right? I want an LLM to tell me something so I can make a decision. There is a trade-off between precision and cost. You can make that LLM be pretty precise, but the amount of tokens you need to cram down its throat in the process are going to cost you a lot of money, are going to cost you a lot of compute to get to the precision that you want. So the answer to your question, or to your potential assertion that data may not win, for lack of a better word, I think it's a yin and a yang. And I think that data will always be there because we will still need precision at low cost, precision at reasonably low cost. Yes. It will come through tables, joins, schemas, that world. But when we don't need precision, and when we need creativity potentially, or when we are not as concerned with the cost, actually, then I think the AI could win. So I think maybe it's probably going to be both, and these worlds need to come together. And I think the CDOs are in a unique position to make a land grab. I'll just use that phrase, make a land grab. Like I mean, because these people, like these are people with your backgrounds. These are the library scientists, the ontologists, the taxonomists. They're all over the organization,
Yeah.
right? Right?
Yeah.
Like without one single leader, generally.
Yeah, sure. Agreed. They are all over. They will be found in like archives or records management departments. They will be found in like legal departments performing information management. They will be found in information security management, perhaps having specialized into cybersecurity, stuff like that. They will be found all over. And I think we will always need precision. We will always need structured data. I think in the past, perhaps we used structured data and precision as a compromise because we simply did not have the technological means to store data in any other way. Now, I think in the future, I think we will use precision and structured data for where it really counts. No pun intended. But but anyway, maybe this is getting a little like, is all of this getting too academic? I mean,
I don't know. I should have known if you and I were given more than 15 or 20 minutes to talk about something, it would kind of veer towards these very, very big picture, big picture things, academic discussions. But I think, for CDOs, I think that what you should be taking away from this is that there's this whole other world out there of unstructured data, and you need to go start figuring it out. Right now, whether you call it a dimension or an asset or a facet or an attribute, it doesn't really matter. But you need to start going and figuring out what unstructured data is, get your arms around it, how to govern it. Like that one, man. But getting back to the context thing, I want to ask you about something that I'm seeing, and I find it interesting. You wrote a book. You wrote literally the book about data catalogs. So I should have said this at the beginning of our discussion. Ole is the author of two O'Reilly books, the Enterprise Data Catalog and Metadata Management. The fundamentals of metadata management, forgive me. The latter of which was released last year, and the Enterprise Data Catalog was 2023, right? Ole?
Yeah, exactly. It was 2023. I'm writing the second edition right now, as we speak.
Congratulations. That means that people are buying it, which is a second edition is a very, very good sign.
Yeah.
But getting back to the idea of context and the data catalog, if you ask me, like as a CDO, the first if I'm context curious, right? If I'm trying to figure out how to do context, one of the first things that I would probably suggest is if you don't already have a data catalog, you're going to need one. But let's assume you had a data catalog. Do you have all of your kind of core terms defined in your catalog? To me, that's a wonderful source of context, right? Is to get your definitions out of your data catalog and expose them to an agentic workflow. It could be as simple as dumping things into Markdown, where all of your definitions can be consumed by an agent. That seems like a fairly digestible thing to do. But it's interesting, my question here is that I'm increasingly seeing analytics people, the reporting people, using the semantics that are existing in analytics layers that have always existed in analytics layers, like the definitions in like what's annual revenue. What does that mean? Like the definitions that are existing in like a Power BI or Click or Tableau, where instead of getting definitions from a catalog, it seems like a lot of people are just deferring to existing semantic layers that are sitting in our analytics layers. Are you seeing the same thing? You seeing that?
And that's kind of the reality I describe in my second book, The Fundamentals of Metadata Management book. So the first book came out because I basically had something to say about data catalogs. To be very honest, I wasn't very impressed with the majority of vendors in the space. I thought they had built, like from a software point of view, they've built their catalogs in not the most optimized way or setup. I wanted to provide an implementation guide that when beyond traditional data management and actually explained what a catalog was about so that it could be functional for the end users. And so I also wanted to bridge like my background, library information science, and I worked in tech. So I wanted to bridge that with the computer science, data engineering, these fields that uses data catalogs. And in that, I think, is also obviously both a data dictionary and a business glossary that you can put into a data catalog. Now, the second book that I wrote was both more complicated, but also more rooted in reality, because what you will find in a company, obviously, is not, or typically not, one data catalog or one BI tool or other data tools, information management tool. You will find a lot, and you will find a lot of them containing dictionaries, explanations, abbreviations, and so forth. And so that's the enterprise reality of the context that we're discussing here. It does not reside in one single place. It resides in many places, and we need to coordinate that. But first and foremost, we need to acknowledge it. I think many companies, for better or worse, they work in silos. And so I think for CDOs that listen to this podcast, I think one very important task is to acknowledge that this is the reality in companies, and they need to look beyond more than one source in order to really grasp the context of a company, if I may just be so blunt. So for example, yes, I mean, yes, I've seen that. I am not against it. I don't think it's an anti-pattern. It's human behavior.
Well, so you introduced this concept. You called it the metagrid. At least you introduced it to me in Austin, Texas, in January 2025. That was, I think, was the genesis for you completing your book on the fundamentals of metadata management. And it's impossible to argue because it's accurate. Right? Metadata repositories exist everywhere, and wherever you've got a metadata repository / data catalog, one form or another, you're going to have definitions, whether they're explicit or whether they're implicit. Wherever this metadata is, you will have things. There will be definitions for it. So, I think the question is, I already know where you stand on this, and I'm open to being wrong about this, but I still think that there's a role for centralized management of those definitions. Or is it? Do you agree? Disagree?
No, ultimately I agree. I mean, I'm trained in centralizing it, and I am always in favor of that. I think that, like, it's a result of many things, but obviously every enterprise is a living organism, right? It has many different parts that are all alive, and they are not all as well connected as we would wish. And technology tends to follow the law known as Conway's law, right? So that it mimics the communication structure of the company. And that is why semantically we find ourselves in a situation where we have multiple glossaries and multiple definitions. I think for a data discussion, there is very little wiggle room in terms of, like, for example, master data management, where we have discussed multiple times. If you want operational data to function across your value chain, there is just not a lot of wiggle room. You have to accept shared definitions, master data, in order for a product to reach a customer. It is simply not up for academic discussion what an address should be, what a country is, what your product name is, and where the customer lives, and what the name of the customer is, or the number of the customer. Those things just need to work for your products to reach your consumers. But above that level, I think many things are up in the air, and that is not by intention. And it's just, and so, and thank you for mentioning the metagrid concept. I mean, I have been quiet about the metagrid, and that is simply because I I have my own idiosyncrasies, and one of them is that I would not like to be a new data mesh guy. I don't want to be the person that invented a term that got hyped and then got associated with a term that is no longer hyped. So the term really began to take off, and when that happened, I kind of checked out of my own hype. I don't want to be hyped.
All right. I can't think of a better way to end the discussion than I don't want to be hyped. All right. Thank you, my friend. I could do this for hours. I know we could. It's a shame we didn't get to spend more time in London a few weeks ago when we were at the IRM conference, but maybe we could have another coffee in London in another month.
Let's do that. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Really, really enjoyed talking with you. To our listeners, to our subscribers, check out Ole's books. I have them both. I've read them both. They are extremely insightful and well worth your investment. Check out Ole's work at Actian. You have a podcast with your CTO, Emma McGrattan. What's the name of your podcast again?
Enterprise-wide Search.
Enterprise-wide Search. So check out Ole's podcast, books. If you're not following him on LinkedIn, you must follow him on LinkedIn, one of the smartest people in data. With that, I will leave you, my friends. Take a moment to take a moment to subscribe and support the creation of this content. I will keep doing it. I think we're on episode 105 now, which is just crazy. Thanks to all of our subscribers, our listeners, and I will see you on another episode of the CDO Matters podcast very soon. Bye for now.